Alright everyone, it's time to return to French election mode, because of course their big vote is coming up there. Le Pen has come out and now she's vowed to suspend all immigration to France. It looks very much like a Trump line. It could have been taken directly from sort of Trump's campaign playbook. One of the things he pledged to do is to temporarily ban immigration from some nations in order to stabilize the situation with refugees, migrants, and so forth. That played well to his core fans. It played well to people that maybe they didn't like him too much, but they realized that immigration was a major issue, and they didn't really stand with the multi-culti folks. Le Pen appears to be doing the same thing, maybe to rob votes from Fillon or something like that, honestly. But when we look at the French election, we have to judge what we know to be true before we can speculate on anything else. This is a good process to use when you're attempting to analyze politics. And I've held off making a more diehard prediction in the French election for who's going to lead their country, because their electoral system makes it much, much harder to judge who will actually win. If there's any closeness at all, it's a lot harder than our election. Here in the US, you look at the polling within competitive states, you look at the polling methodology, you see, does it seem sane, or does it seem kind of a little bit out there? Is there polling bias here that we're seeing? I judged that there was. That's why I was able to analyze that so correctly. But with the French election, it's a lot harder because it's going to go to a second ballot, and there's no telling specifically who people are going to go to. We don't even specifically know. There's not a 100% certainty who's even going to be on the second ballot. We know there will be one. No one's going to get above 50%. But while Le Pen and Macron, Le Pen representing Front National, sort of right and Euroscepticism, Macron represents a continuation of sort of the Hollande socialism light policies, it's not guaranteed that both of them will necessarily be the second ballot. You've also got Fillon, who's near 20%. He's only a few points below Macron and Le Pen, all things considered within polling. He represents basically Le Pen minus Le Pen, it seems. And I would assume if she's on the second ballot, most of his supporters go to her. It's a pretty good guess. Then there's Mélenchon, who is essentially a communist. He's from the far left. He's more of the beard-toting Marxist type. And I guess the standard wisdom is most of his supporters would go to Macron on a second ballot. But either Fillon or Mélenchon could come out of nowhere. There could be, again, some sort of methodology within the polling that's flawed, meaning that one or both of them is actually higher than speculated. It could be that Le Pen or Macron collapses well ahead. You could see a situation, it's very, very remote of a chance. You've got a better chance of Le Pen becoming the next leader of France than this situation. You could see like Mélenchon versus Fillon, in which case I think Fillon would probably pull it off. But it is possible for that to happen. But we have to look at what we know. What we know is that consistently within polling, Le Pen and Macron have an advantage. You then have these second wheel candidates from the left and from the right that are doing well. They are very close to the front runners, but they appear to be about 5 points behind. What we know is that in all likelihood it will probably come down to Macron versus Le Pen on a second ballot. But that's about as far as we can go. We don't even necessarily know which one of those is in first on the first ballot. Originally, about a month ago, it looked like it was probably going to be Le Pen by 5 points or something like that. Since then, though, Fillon has risen slightly, eating away at her support. Macron has fallen away as well as Le Pen to the far left. And so it's not entirely certain anymore. They're so close in polling, it's no longer we can't say that Le Pen wins the first ballot. She's probably one of the top two, the same with Macron, but we don't know which one of them comes out ahead. When Le Pen does this, she's fighting for sort of maybe the former wealthy neighborhood turned multicultural slum vote, as well as, you know, the more rural vote from within France. A decent strategy. Macron has echoed the line over and over, oh, just maintain the status quo, essentially. That's what he represents. I think a lot of even first-wave French immigrants probably don't want to do that. But ultimately, the main thing that we have to observe is that Le Pen, number one, has already won, in essence. Front National, the last time around, basically, disappeared from the battlefield, didn't really do much. And even that was an improvement on former eras. Now, it looks like she's at least in second place, possibly takes first. The Front National is a major party within France. It's obvious that immigration isn't the only issue at play here anymore. It's sort of like what happens with Brexit, what happens with their voting there, what happens with Wilders or Hofer or any of these other people, the Swedish Democrats. It's gone beyond immigration. It's now a larger scale cultural argument. Immigration is simply injected over and over by the populist and nationalist movements in Europe because it happens to be the top issue that people are thinking about when they support these groups, to get them fired up, to get them out to vote. Another thing that we need to observe is that not only has Le Pen already basically made her point, but she's also got the globalists within the EU terrified. In fact, she's not the only candidate doing well who's a Eurosceptic. Fillon is also a Eurosceptic as well. Maybe a little bit less so at times, a little bit more so at other times, but represents sort of this same general movement. On that second ballot, I would be... my expectation would be she probably ends up around 45-46%. That is, she does very, very well, is obviously the second place finisher. The collapse of the center as well, this is the final point, has already occurred. Macron represents the continuation of the status quo. What we see in nation after nation after nation is that centrism, parties and ideologies that were formerly considered sacrosanct, are the ones that have suffered the most. We look to the Netherlands, the voting there. Who collapses and who rises? Populism rises, far leftism rises, to the point at which the far left there is now the main coalition member with the governing body that actually won. The establishment party basically collapsed away along with its more centrist allies. Its allies collapsed almost out of existence. When we look to the UK, when we look at who's governing there, the old Labour movement, which was seen as sort of the sane left or something, dies off. The new wave of conservatives there, the Tory party, are further right perhaps than they were. SNP essentially wipes everybody else out in Scotland. The literal Scottish nationalists that want a secession movement now hold virtually limitless power in Scotland. Then you have the growth, much slower growth of some of the more far-right movements. You'd think UKIP or BNP or something. You look at Sweden, who's rising up there. The Swedish Democrats, formerly labeled sort of this sort of, ethnocentric and evil party, maybe militaristic or something. They're not. I mean, they're actually real centrists, but they seem far-right by comparison to what's been there. We look at Austria. Who did it come down to? It comes down to the head of a former Teutonic ethnic party versus essentially communism light. Where's the center? Where's the establishment within that election? It doesn't even exist. Nobody cares about it. They don't have any power whatsoever. They're being wiped out all across Europe. So here's the point. As this struggle continues, centrist movements will fail. They will falter. They will continue to lose steam. The far left and far right will gobble up more and more support. You will see more protests in Europe over the coming decade. You will see more riots in Europe over the coming decade, unless there is a total policy reversal. But here's the key. If the establishment does hold a nation, that is, it isn't yet supplanted by Eurosceptics on the right or by dedicated far left parties, if they hold court, if they manage to succeed and survive, they will not reverse their policies. They may say they will when they campaign, but they never will. The problem continues to fester. The right and left continue to grow. If the left takes hold, the right grows as a reactionary movement. If the right takes hold, the left continues to grow as a reaction to the rise of populism or nativism or whatever you want to term it within these states. You see the cracking apart of the center because the center has shifted outwards in both directions. Some of these states will end up under the control of groups that are essentially communists. Some of these states will end up under the control of ethno-nationalists. There will also be more populistic movements like Front National. Anyone saying that Le Pen is like a total, ethnocentric Nazi sort of, goose-stepping, that's not common sense. It's not what she's about. She's a sane individual, at least in my opinion. But it is true that if you look at French politics, who's benefited? Macron has the slimmest of leads, if anything, and represents the old dying center. Combined, the leftist movements and the sort of populist Eurosceptic right have virtually all the support. They got like 75% of the voters are going to be supporting them. There's not much meat and bones left for the centrists. This is probably the last French election in which the center will survive, if it even survives this time. Now, I think there's about a 75-80% chance Macron does win. I follow that standard logic because I don't see any systemic polling bias or anything like that. I think he ends up winning. But he's greatly weakened. His margin of victory is slight. He has to deal with the fact that the second largest vote share goes to essentially nationalism light and Euroscepticism. He has to deal with that, but he can't deal with members of his own party or with the EU and actually address those issues. They continue. The immigration continues. Cultural displacement continues. Economic problems continue because that centrist model no longer works. Next time around, the center will collapse even further. Unless he is a stellar individual and very, very, very good at PR, he won't survive through another election. Le Pen will be the next leader, almost certainly, of France, or it'll be somebody who's far, far left. They may be a Eurosceptic far leftist, in which case it doesn't really matter. France regains its sovereignty. Whether it regains it and then immediately jettisons it, but at least it made a national decision to admit, hordes of people who won't, really care about French culture, or whether it goes towards the populist, sort of the nativist right wing. It won't really matter. The center's gone. The old center's gone. Here in the United States, we saw the same thing. Hillary Clinton had difficulty staving off a self-proclaimed socialist. The Republican Party was usurped by someone who is best classed as a quasi-paleo-conservative or something like that, who campaigned as a total populist. He's gone back to the center on some of these issues. Not all, but some. At the same time, though, it shows that the people don't really like the old neoconservative movement. By the way, if Trump totally fails, the Republican Party will go through a further overhaul. The paradigm shift won't stop. Trump remaining true to his guns on at least a few major issues is a prerequisite to the Republican Party not fracturing further. The Democrats have already, they patched a few of their wounds with some Band-Aids, and now their ship of state would-be is slowly sinking into the icy water. They're going to have major problems regardless of what Trump does. Trump could be totally unpopular. It's not going to help the Democrats. They're not going to be any more popular than he is until they swing far left, or they become sort of a workers' front, sort of a center-left party, union-based like they used to be, decades ago, in JFK era or something. They're going to suffer more than the Republicans will. And all over Europe, I look at Le Pen. I say, aha, the second-place finisher may be first place on the first ballot, and could, in theory at least, eke out a win, although I don't expect it, is going to be a total Eurosceptic who's been labeled by the French press as being just shy of a neo-Nazi. Oh, this party was run by neo-Nazis a while ago, and she reformed it. Yeah, she's got different ideas, but she's still a secret neo-Nazi. And yeah, she's going to come in second place, in France of all places. Not exactly the most far-right traditionalist culture within Europe, and she's doing pretty damn well. And largely that's due to immigration. I'm not surprised she's coming out to say this at the 11th hour before voting. I'm not surprised, and it'll probably do fairly well for her. Will it give her the win? Still not convinced that she can actually win. Yeah, there might be rigging going on too. But then again, we could see there's one thing that could cause that. If the far left under people like Mélenchon are backing the far left because they're just tired of the old ways of Macron and Hollande and all these people, some of them might switch over and vote for Le Pen on a second ballot just to punish the center. If that happens, she probably does win. Because she's already absorbed most of Fillon's support, some of these other minor candidates, those people will be backing her. It's possible. It's not outside of the realm of possibility, it's just less likely. We have to take likelihood into consideration. So I can't make a hard prediction of who wins the French election. I can say it's more likely Macron wins. But if Le Pen does, it wouldn't be the biggest surprise in all of human history. But I mean, you shouldn't gamble on the French election based on my analysis because, again, their political system is different from ours here. That's about all. Peace out.